and welcome to all YouTube dog training fans. I would like to introduce John to you today. John is a war veteran that suffers from PTSD. We had the honor to train his dog to be perfectly obedient in public settings that John is taking the dog to because he needs the dog to be around him 24/7 to help him with anxiety attacks. So here's the interview with John explaining what PTSD really is and what the dog is doing for him. You guys enjoy. I thought it's very informative. I didn't know as much as what I learned from the interview about PTSD, its syndromes, and its treatments. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you think that the material we provide is interesting to you. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time. So we're here with John today. John is a PTSD diagnosed patient, can I say that?
That's correct.
And we just finished training his dog Thor, which is not trained to do anything particular for John. We just did the training of him being able to take the dog everywhere and be well behaved and not bother anybody. And what the dog does for John, we're going to talk about at the end, and that's something you can't train. So John, if you could just describe what PTSD really is.
PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, is a psychiatric condition caused by a traumatic event. I was a soldier for 13 years. I had a traumatic event a couple of times in conflict. Anybody can have PTSD, not just soldiers. As a matter of fact, 1 in 11 people in their lifetime will be diagnosed with PTSD. It's only caused by any traumatic event. It could be a robbery, rape, a car accident. I experienced mine in the military.
Okay.
The way PTSD works, to make it simple to understand, when we experience something in life, like a wedding or a birth of a child, we process that memory through our brain, which is like a factory. We experience it, we take the memory, and we store it, and we call it up when we want to feel those good feelings again. But we process it and we store it. With PTSD, the factory is broken. When we have the experience, we can't fully store it. And what happens is something will re-trigger the memory. A touch, a sound, a sight, a smell re-triggers the memory, and you have all the feelings that you had at that time you re-experience again. So all the fear, all the anxiety, whatever you're going through at that time hits you all over again.
So what you're saying is, to make this clear, it's an experience that's stored in a broken file, or like you say, a factory.
The factory is broken.
And that's what PTSD is.
And that's what PTSD is.
Okay, so what happens?
So what happens is, for me and for most PTSD patients, I'll hear a sound or I'll smell something. Typically it's a sound for me. And it triggers that memory which hasn't been properly stored. I don't get the choice whether I want to retrieve it. It's forced on me. And I re-experience. I'll have flashbacks. I'll shake. I'll cry. Some people call it like an anxiety attack. If you ever hear anybody say they've had an anxiety attack. Myself, I'll shake. I'll feel nauseous. My head will spin. I'll have intense fear and anxiety when I re-experience the feelings of that event.
So how do you function when you have that recalled memory or the experience again that you're going through? What exactly happens?
Well, it's very debilitating. You cannot control your emotions or your bodily actions. If you're driving, you have to stop. You can't. There are things you just cannot function. Myself, I shake, I fall apart, I'll cry, I won't be able to catch my breath, my head will spin, It's very debilitating. It's enough. It's enough to warrant, in a lot of cases, a disability rating. I received disability from the Veterans Administration for PTSD, but anybody can have it.
So what did you do to? What do you do when you have an episode and you don't have any help? No dog,
Okay.
no people around you.
In therapy, they teach you 5 ways. The idea is to stop the episode, to divert your
Right.
attention,
Get you out.
get you off of it. Divert the episode, stop the episode, put your attention on something else.
Like
in
what?
in therapy, they taught us the 5-finger method, the 5 senses. If I'm having an episode, look at my thumb and think of the best food, my best taste that I like.
Oh,
Look at my finger and think of the best sound that I like. Look at this finger and think of the best smell that I like. So that you divert your attention into something good, not something negative. And that breaks the episode, breaks the cycle.
puts it back in the
Puts it back in the
factory.
broken factory where it sits
And it comes back.
until it comes back.
Right.
PTSD is a lifetime diagnosis. You don't ever you might get better in managing it, but you're never cured.
Never recover from it.
Never recover from it.
So now tell us about the dog.
The dog. Well, I got Thor because the VA recommended that I get a dog. And what happens is when I go into an episode, Thor actually senses that. He knows I'm going into an episode. He runs over to me. If I'm sitting down, he jumps up with the first half of his body on my lap and lays his head against my chest.
When
And
you
immediately
sit down,
breaks
you're
the
gonna
cycle.
have you know you're gonna have an
Have it.
episode.
I've got to sit down, and
Yeah,
then
okay.
he jumps literally half his. He's a big dog, a shepherd. He puts half his body right here in my lap, and he lays his head right against my chest on my heart, and just lays and looks up at me. And when he does that, the cycle's immediately broken.
Huh.
Immediately broken. I feel safe again. I feel secure again. All the anxiety, all the fear, everything stops. It's the perfect cure.
So that you got Thor with what? 8 weeks, 10 weeks?
At 8 weeks old, got Thor at 8 weeks old. For the first 8 months, he was tied no more than 3 or 4 feet to my belt. I actually tied him to my belt.
Mhm.
By being close to me all the time, he developed the ability to sense when I was having an episode. And he knew what to do. He knew to come to me.
How long? When did you realize that the dog actually responds to preceding changes in your body? I want to call it before you have an episode. How long? Like was it 4 months of age?
It was
5
about the
months?
8-month mark.
Oh,
It was
really?
about the 8-month mark.
Okay.
And when he
So-
started reacting, about the 8-month mark.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that's something that you can't train, like I said before.
No,
so we
no,
hear
the dog's got
right
it.
now that this is something the dog learns what happens in John's body chemically, and is followed by an episode that the dog pays attention to. Correct?
That's correct.
That's a super explanation for how these things work, because we have people asking us about training, and it's just in my book no way to actually train those behaviors. So you would agree that those behaviors grow.
They grow with the dog with you. You've got to get the dog early.
Right.
Get the dog as early as you can. Bond with that dog. There's two adults in my house. And what we did was the other one deliberately did not give that dog much affection. And that dog stayed tied to me, so we would bond as the dog grew. Now we're inseparable. The dog, he does everything for me. At one point in time in therapy, I was taking 14 psychotropic drugs and medications to try to control and manage the PTSD. With the dog, I take 0. 0.
That's so great. So thanks for the interview. I think there's great interest in knowing what PTSD really is, because the reason why I asked you to do this little interview here was actually that we see a lot of people that just say, oh yeah, I have PTSD and I want to take my dog everywhere. So here's the real guy, John, with the straight from the horse's mouth explanation of what it is and how it works, that the dog actually helps him to get through those narrow paths of having these attacks that obviously cannot be treated with anything but mind manipulation, I want to call it.
Drugs are, let's face it, we're a drug society in America.
Right.
The psychiatric doctors, all they want to do is prescribe drugs. The reason I was up to 14 pills every day was because when I had a side effect from one pill, they would give me another pill.
Okay.
Right? With this dog, none. I take none. The dog manages my PTSD.
That's so great to know, because that's a true purpose for a dog to be. So we thank you for the interview, John.
You're welcome.
To share your real experience. Like I said, from the horse's mouth. Thanks a lot, and we enjoyed training your dog, and I hope you're happy with it.
Absolutely, I recommend everybody get their dog trained by Andreas.
That's great. That you say
Everybody.
that. Great advertising. I didn't do anything. I didn't pay John.
Not at all.
He paid me.
I did.
All right. We'll see you all later.
All righty, thank you.